I was sitting alone in my living room when my phone buzzed. It was a voice message from my son. At first, I thought it was just a mistake, but then I heard him call me a burden, just a roadblock in the way of the house. The words cut deeper than anything I had faced in my 70 years. I raised that boy, gave him everything I had. And now this. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, staring at the dark window, my chest tight, but my mind sharper than ever. What he didn't know was that I had already begun keeping records. Every word, every slip, every lie. And when the day comes, I'll have the proof in my hands. So what do you think happened when I finally confronted him? Stay with me until the end of this story, and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. The December nights in Asheville always carried a kind of quiet weight, a stillness that wrapped itself around the house once the sun dipped behind the Blue Ridge Mountains. The old floorboards groaned when I walked across them, and the tick of the grandfather clock was the only companion to my solitude. That house had been built with my wife's laughter echoing in every corner, but since she passed, it had become a shelter of silence. Sitting in my worn recliner with a blanket across my knees, I tried to lose myself in the comfort of old memories. The buzz of my phone on the coffee table startled me. Hardly anyone called at that hour, and when I leaned forward to check, I saw a voice message from Darian. For a moment, warmth stirred. Perhaps he'd thought of me. I tapped play, expecting something light, maybe about Elliot's school project or a quick reminder about dinner plans. But the words that came through were not meant for me. You know how hard it is to deal with him, always dragging things out, clinging to his independence. He's just a burden now, a roadblock. The voice was Darian's, my son, my only son. His tone was flat, clipped, heavy with irritation I had never heard directed so openly toward me. I froze in the chair, the phone tight in my grip, my breath caught halfway in my chest. A burden, a roadblock. The words sank deeper because they weren't supposed to reach me. They had been meant for Marla, his wife, and in that accidental slip, the mask fell away. I sat there, heart heavy, humiliation pressing down as if the walls themselves leaned closer. He spoke of money, of inheritance, of waiting for me to fade from the picture. Every syllable cracked something inside. I replayed the message, not because I wanted to suffer it again, but because disbelief begged me to prove myself wrong. But no, there it was, my son's voice, betraying what he never dared to say to my face. The next few days passed in a blur of forced normalcy. When I was invited to dinner at Darian's home, I went, partly out of duty, partly because I needed to see if his words were truly what he felt, or just a moment's lapse. Marla opened the door with her polished smile, polite but cool. Her words dripped with courtesy, yet the warmth was hollow. Darian came forward, cheerful on the surface, patting my back with a practiced grin, but his eyes dodged mine, and every laugh felt rehearsed. Only Elliot's voice carried genuine joy. He ran to me, arms wide, babbling about his latest toy car. I held him close, clinging to his innocence like a life raft in a sea of deceit. Still, the room was suffocating. Every gesture from Darian, every clipped tone from Marla, was sharpened by the memory of that message. I said little that evening, letting silence be my shield. My son told stories, cracked jokes, all while his body stiffened whenever he thought I wasn't watching. I noticed the way his smile slipped the second he turned his head, how quickly it reappeared when he faced me again. He believed the facade intact, but I had heard. At the end of dinner, as plates were cleared, Darian's eyes finally met mine. For the briefest second, the disdain resurfaced behind his mask, a flicker of the truth I'd already come to know. Inside, a whisper formed. He thinks I didn't hear, but I did, and I will not forget. That night, lying in bed, the words circled endlessly in the dark. The weight of them pressed down harder than the winter cold seeping through the windows. Sleep would not come, only the replay of that message, each time cutting deeper. The night after dinner had been long and sleepless. The clock ticked loudly in the quiet of my kitchen, but the coffee in front of me sat untouched, growing cold by the minute. My mind circled back to Darian's laugh at the table, how it never reached his eyes, and Marla's courteous smile that felt more like a mask than warmth. The words from that message played over and over, lodged in my head like a thorn. A burden, a roadblock, I muttered to myself, not out of despair but as a promise. They think I'm blind, but I am not. The following afternoon, Darian showed up at my door with a paper grocery bag in his hands. "Thought I'd bring you some fruit." "Dad," he said, his voice a little too polished. He set the bag on the counter as though it made him a dutiful son. Small talk carried us through a few minutes. The weather, my health, before his tone shifted. "You know," he began, folding his arms and leaning against the counter, "I've been thinking, managing bills, property taxes, insurance. It must be a lot for you these days. Maybe I should take it off your plate." His words hung heavy in the air. Outwardly, I nodded slowly, as if considering. Inside, though, suspicion bristled. I caught the way his eyes avoided mine when he said, "Take it off your plate," like he was rehearsing lines for an audience not present. "It's not good for you to worry about those things," he continued. "You deserve rest." A careful choice of words, wrapped in the kind of sweetness that hides a bitter seed. I sipped my cold coffee, keeping my voice level. "I appreciate the concern, son. I'll think about it." That evening, Marla picked up the thread without missing a beat. We were standing by the dining table, Elliot stacking toy cars in a row, when she glanced at me and said, "You know, it really would be better for everyone if you let Darian handle things. You've carried enough weight all your life. Isn't it time to let go?" Her tone was soft, even sympathetic, but the edge beneath it was clear. They wanted me boxed in, cornered, with no way out except to hand them the keys. I forced a smile, nodding politely, giving her nothing more than a vague, "I'll keep that in mind." Silence was my shield, and I wore it well. Then came the moment that cracked their careful facade. Elliot, bright-eyed and innocent, chirped out as he arranged his cars. "Daddy said when Grandpa's house is gone, we can get a pool." The room froze. Marla stiffened, her hand clutching the back of a chair. Darian's face flushed, and he snapped, "Elliot, that's enough." The boy looked confused, retreating into silence. A tightness gripped my chest, though my face stayed calm. It was all the confirmation I needed. The contempt in that message, the push to take control. Now this careless slip, it all fit together too neatly. My own family wasn't just waiting for me to grow old, they were waiting for me to disappear. I bent down, ruffled Elliot's hair, and forced a soft chuckle. "A pool, huh? That sounds exciting." My voice was steady, but inside the wound cut deep. Later, alone in my room, the mask slipped, the smile faded, and the weight of their betrayal settled heavily on my shoulders. Staring at the phone in my hand, I pressed play again. Darian's voice spilled out. The contempt, the impatience, the cruel calculation. This time, I didn't hear it as a son mocking his father. I heard it as evidence, raw and undeniable. "So," I whispered to the dark, "it's not just in my head. They plan to erase me." The words didn't sound like defeat. They sounded like resolve. The invitation arrived in Marla's clipped tone, tucked into a brief phone call that felt more like a notice than a gesture of warmth. She said it was a family dinner, the sort of gathering that used to mean laughter and plates passed around with love. I paused before answering, a silence heavy with all I had learned in the last days. In the end, I agreed, not out of trust, but because part of me still clung to the hope that some bond remained to salvage. I ironed my shirt, straightened my old jacket, and whispered to myself that this night I would watch more than I would speak. Their home glowed under the December lights when I arrived, polished and perfect, as if arranged for a magazine cover. Inside, the dining table stretched long, its shine reflecting the chandelier's glow. I was seated at the edge, not at the center where once a father might have been. The conversation fluttered around me like cold drafts, pleasant words, clipped laughter, but none directed at me. Marla's smile never reached her eyes. Darian's voice lifted now and then, talking about work, the neighborhood, anything but me. Only Elliot pierced the chill, his small voice spilling cheerful stories about his day at school, about a game he played at recess. He spoke to me directly, eyes bright and trusting. In his chatter, I saw the only thread of sincerity in that house, yet even his words were wrapped in a silence that pressed down on me. The adults treating me like a figure to be acknowledged, not embraced. Each polite nod I received cut sharper than any open insult. Between courses, my eyes wandered, searching for something to anchor me. That was when I noticed it. A folder left half open on a side table, as though forgotten. A sliver of paper peeked out, and words leapt at me. Power of attorney. Transfer. My chest tightened. Before I could read more, Marla's eyes followed mine. Her hand moved quickly, too quickly, sweeping the folder closed and tucking it under her arm as if it had never been there. She returned to her seat with a smile that was more a warning than a kindness. I said nothing, but the silence inside me was no longer just sadness. It was suspicion sharpening into fear. Darian rose with a glass of wine, lifting it high. His words rang hollow. To family unity, to caring for one another, to love that holds us together. Each phrase dripped with irony, for I still heard the echo of his true voice, the one that called me a burden when he thought I could not hear. I lifted my glass, but my lips stayed still. My silence was the only answer I could bear to give. Inside, bitterness pooled deeper, mixing with the weight of that folder I had glimpsed. When the plates were cleared and coats fetched, I stood ready to leave. At the doorway, Marla leaned close, her breath cool against my ear. You should really let Darian handle everything. For your own good. The words struck harder than any slap, whispered with a finality that made my heart thud. I stepped out into the winter night, the stars sharp above me, the frost biting against clenched fists. In my pocket, I carried a scrap of paper, words hastily scribbled when no one was looking. Power of attorney. That phrase now burned against my palm, proof of intentions I could no longer dismiss as paranoia. The cold air filled my lungs as I whispered to the dark sky. They think I'll surrender. They don't know me. The next morning, the air was crisp as I walked along the quiet streets of Asheville. Frost clung to the grass, and the church bells in the distance carried a hollow echo. Wendell Stroud, my neighbor, spotted me and slowed his pace until we were side by side. He fiddled with his cap, hesitant, before speaking. Lemuel, I don't mean to pry, but I overheard something. Darian's been talking about making changes with your house. Big changes. The words landed like stones in my gut. Wendell's eyes darted away, as though he regretted saying it. I nodded, thanking him with a quiet pat on his arm. I didn't show him the weight of it, but inside, suspicion turned to a heavier certainty. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was truth creeping in through every crack. Back home, I sank into the worn armchair by the window. The family dinner. The folder labeled Power of Attorney. Wendell's whispered warning, every piece fit into a pattern. They weren't simply talking behind my back. They were preparing, lining up papers, conversations, rumors, slowly, methodically stripping away what little I had left of my independence. The rage burned, but I held it steady. Rage needed direction. Quiet resolve formed, like steel cooling under fire. They thought of me as fragile, slipping, unable to see. But my mind was sharp, sharper than they knew. Days later, I walked into church, hoping for a sliver of peace. Instead, I caught Marla's voice drifting from a circle of women near the pews. Her tone was hushed but deliberate, the way gossip always is. He's not well anymore, Deke, she said. Memory slipping, maybe dementia. It's been hard, really. Their nods, their sympathetic sighs, cut me deeper than knives. They were believing her, believing that I was fading, incapable. Heat crawled up my neck as humiliation burned through me. My fists clenched inside my coat pockets, but I forced my face to remain calm, composed. In that moment, a vow crystallized. They could smear me with lies, paint me weak before the community, but I would not let them win. The quiet fury inside me whispered, "They will regret painting me as broken." That week, Darian showed up at my door. His tone was soft, almost rehearsed. "Dad," he began, "you should think about what's best for everyone. It's a lot for you to handle alone." His eyes avoided mine, lingering instead on the framed picture of my late wife on the mantel. I stared at him, seeing through the polished concern. It wasn't care, it was conquest. The subtle push of a son who already saw himself in control of what was mine. My voice was calm when I replied, "I've handled more than you'll ever know." His lips pressed into a thin smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. The conversation ended with polite words, but it left me hollowed. The sting of betrayal was sharper now, the line between father and son warped into something cruel. That evening, I stood before the mirror in my bedroom. The face staring back wasn't weak. Wrinkles marked the years, but the eyes were alive, clear, unbroken. I whispered to my reflection, steady and sure, "I am not crazy. I will prove it." Pulling open a locked drawer, I placed my phone recorder inside, hidden yet ready, a silent declaration of war. They wanted to treat me as a man losing grip, but I would turn their every word, every lie, into proof against them. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, as I slid the drawer shut. But in that silence, I felt a new strength, the kind that comes when you know the battle has begun. The silence in my house that night was thicker than any storm. Lying in bed, staring at the shadows stretching across the ceiling, I felt each second drag like a stone tied to my chest. The glow of the phone beside me tempted my hand again, and I pressed play, letting Darian's voice spill into the dark. A burden, a roadblock. The words pierced sharper with every replay, carving wounds that refused to close. A man can only listen so many times before anger grows stronger than pain. Each repetition lit a fire where sorrow had been. My heart no longer wept. It clenched. The memories came next, uninvited but relentless. I saw myself years back, standing in a grease-stained uniform after a double shift, handing Darian $20 for gas money. I remembered emptying my savings for his tuition when he nearly dropped out of college. I pictured the night he called me, desperate after losing his first job, and how I drove 2 hours to bring him home. Love had never been a question. I gave it freely. Yet here I was, cast aside as if all those sacrifices were stones tossed in a river, vanished without ripples. The ache was sharp, but it changed shape. No longer disbelief, no longer despair. Something sturdier began to settle in its place. By dawn, the restlessness drove me out. The small white church down the road had always been our refuge. Mine and my late wife's. Its doors were never locked, and when I stepped inside, the scent of old wood and candle wax wrapped around me like an embrace from her. Kneeling alone in the dim glow, I closed my eyes and let the silence speak. My prayer was not for relief, nor for the pain to fade. It was for strength, to endure the humiliation without breaking, to keep my mind sharp when theirs sought to cloud it, to know the right moment to act. My voice was little more than a whisper. "Lord, give me patience to see, and courage to fight when the time comes." The air seemed lighter when I rose. Hope had anchored itself somewhere deep, faint but steady. Back home, I cleared a space on my desk. The old leather journal I hadn't touched in years lay waiting, page by page. I began writing down everything. Marla's cold glance, the folder marked "Power of Attorney," Wendell's uneasy warning. Each detail became a line in the record, each memory a brick in the wall of truth I was building. They would not blindside me again. I would not confront them, not yet. Patience was my ally now. As the night fell once more, I set the journal beside the small recorder hidden in my drawer. My fingers lingered on both, the tools of a quiet war. My voice, barely audible, filled the room. "If they want a war, I'll give them the truth as my weapon. Then it came, a faint knock at the door, sharp against the stillness, startling enough to send a shiver up my spine. I froze, listening, the echo hanging in the quiet house like a warning. The knock echoed through the house like a thunderclap in the still night. For a moment, silence pressed down, so heavy that even the ticking clock on the mantel seemed to hesitate. When I opened the door, the porch light revealed Wendell Stroud, my neighbor. His shoulders were stiff, his face pale as though he had been carrying a burden too heavy for too long. "Lemuel," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. "I need to talk to you, now." We stepped inside, the old floorboards creaking under his boots. Wendell didn't sit. Instead, he hovered near the window, peeking out as if afraid someone might be watching. I had never seen him like this before. His usual calm, neighborly manner had given way to urgency. "I overheard something," he said. His voice was low, almost shaking. "Your boy, Darian, and Marla, they were talking about you, and it wasn't just frustration or family stuff. It was darker." The words hit harder than the December cold seeping in from the porch. My stomach tightened. I asked him what exactly he'd heard. He swallowed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Marla was on the phone. She said—" He hesitated, as though repeating the words might stain him too. "She said you're becoming a problem, that it's time to remove you from the picture." The phrase landed like a knife. Not only had they dismissed me as a burden, but now I was something to be erased. Wendell's eyes searched mine, waiting for me to crumble, but I didn't. Not yet. I thanked him quietly, though my voice felt hollow. His concern was real, but his words left me trembling inside. After he left, the walls of my house seemed to close in, each shadow a reminder that I was no longer just unwanted. I was a target. Alone. I sat at the table where my cold coffee still lingered from hours before. Piece by piece, the picture formed. The voice message full of disdain, the cold dinners, the folder marked power of attorney, Marla's whispers at church, and now Wendell's warning. This wasn't paranoia. This was a plan. My mind flicked back to the subtle things I'd ignored, Marla pressing me to sign harmless-looking papers, Darian's eyes darting away when I asked about finances. They had been weaving this net slowly, carefully, and I had been too blinded by hope to notice. The weight of the betrayal sank deeper than bone. How could the boy I had carried through storms, fed through hunger, and lifted out of failure, now conspire to strip me bare of the life I built? The anger was hot, but beneath it simmered a colder thought. If they were willing to lie, to manipulate, what else were they willing to do? I needed to know for sure. So, I picked up the phone and dialed Darian. My voice was even, casual, the kind of tone a father might use late at night just to check in. "Son, everything all right? I was thinking about you." There was a pause too long. Then his voice came. Smooth. Almost rehearsed. "Yeah, Dad. Everything's fine. You should rest. Don't worry about things." "Okay. Just let us take care of what needs to be handled." Handled. The word rolled around in my mind, sour and heavy. His tone wasn't the voice of concern. It was the voice of someone laying groundwork, easing me into surrender. I let the conversation drift to nothing, then ended it with a simple, "Good night." My hand shook as I set the phone down, though my face remained stone. Inside, a storm raged. Wendell had told me the truth, and Darian had just confirmed it. I walked through the house, locking the doors and checking the windows. Sitting at my desk, I pulled out my journal, the one I'd begun filling with every hint of betrayal. With careful strokes, I wrote down Wendell's words. Remove him from the picture. That phrase would not be lost to the wind. The house was silent again, but it wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence before thunder. As I closed the journal, my phone vibrated on the desk. The screen lit up with a message from Marla. "We need to meet. Alone." My chest tightened. This wasn't an invitation. It was a move in their game, and whether I liked it or not, I had no choice but to step into it. Morning light filtered through the curtains, but sleep had never truly found me. That late-night message from Marla glowed in my mind like an ember refusing to die. We need to meet. Alone. The words carried no warmth, no reconciliation. They felt more like bait dangling on a hook. Every instinct screamed to ignore it, to shut my door against whatever storm they meant to unleash. Yet experience had taught me something important. When people plot in shadows, light is the only weapon that can expose them. If I didn't show up, I would remain blind to the next part of their scheme. My hands moved slowly as I packed a small recorder into the inside pocket of my jacket. It wasn't new. I had used it long ago to keep lecture notes for myself, back when my life was filled with classrooms instead of loneliness. Now it would serve as a witness. Quiet dread pressed against my chest, but behind it came a hardened calm. They thought I was weak. They thought I was done. Let them. The cafe sat on the edge of town, the kind of place where time seemed to pass slower, where conversations could vanish into the hum of an old refrigerator and the clink of coffee cups. I arrived just after sunrise, the air crisp, my breath visible as I stepped inside. Marla was already there. She didn't wave. She didn't smile in welcome. Instead, her lips curved in a tight line, a gesture pretending at civility but pulsing with something colder. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice soft but sharp, like a blade hidden in velvet. I sat across from her, folding my hands to steady them. The smell of burnt coffee beans and fried bacon filled the air, yet my stomach twisted at every word. "You've been under a lot of stress lately," she began, feigning concern. "Wouldn't it be better, for everyone, if you stepped aside? Darian and I could take the load off your shoulders, manage things, give you peace." The word peace clung like a threat. I met her eyes but said nothing, letting the silence press down until she filled it again. "There are documents, already in progress, just routine matters, power of attorney, some transfers, things that will protect you." Her words spilled out too smoothly, too rehearsed. I shifted slightly, brushing my jacket as though adjusting it against the cafe's chill. A small click sounded inside my pocket, unnoticed. Every syllable now etched itself into memory, not just mine, but into a machine that could not be twisted by lies. She leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper that stung more than if she had shouted. "You can fight this. Of course, but Darian agrees with me. And if you resist, you'll only make yourself lonelier. Is that how you want to spend what's left?" The coffee between us grew cold, untouched. My pulse beat loud in my ears, but outwardly I remained still, calm. Inside, fury coiled tight. Her threats, her manipulation, the casual way she wielded my son's name like a weapon, each word was a nail sealing the coffin they hoped to build around me. I nodded slowly, as though considering her offer, and pushed back my chair. "I'll think about it," I said, my tone deliberately flat. The moment I stepped outside, winter air hit me like a slap, sharp and cleansing. My hand went straight to the recorder. The tiny red light winked back at me. Every word she'd spoken now lived in that device. Evidence, proof. But before relief could settle, tires crunched against gravel. A familiar car pulled up, stopping just feet away. Darian stepped out. His expression carried no warmth of a son greeting his father, only a blank, unreadable mask. His eyes locked onto mine. For the first time, I wasn't sure if I was looking at family or at a stranger determined to finish what they had begun. Darian stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching beneath his shoes as though each step was a verdict. The winter air cut sharp, but it was nothing compared to the coldness in his eyes. For a moment we just stood there, father and son, locked in silence. "Dad," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his face. "Darian." The reply slipped from my lips slow and deliberate. The space between us felt wider than the parking lot we stood in. Years of memories, birthday cakes, scraped knees, graduations, stood like ghosts in the air. Yet none of them softened the wall he had built inside. I held steady, my chest aching, but my voice calm. Strange place for a family reunion. He glanced away, his hands buried in his pockets. We just need to make this easier. For everyone. Mom. He stopped, correcting himself with a bitter twitch of his jaw. Marla thinks it's best if you sign the papers. That way things don't get messy. My breath caught, but I held it in place. The papers, I repeated, each word heavy. The ones that would make my own house no longer mine? He shifted uneasily, not answering. I leaned a little closer, my voice lower. That message you sent me, was that truly a mistake? Or was it a warning you hoped I'd hear? For the first time, he faltered. His eyes flickered, betraying him more than words ever could. He didn't answer, and that silence told me more than any explanation. Before either of us could speak again, another car door slammed shut. Marla's heels clicked against the pavement as she approached, her smile polished, her chin high like she was stepping onto a stage she owned. Well, she said smoothly, sliding her arm through Darian's. Isn't this cozy? Father, son, and the future of this family all in one place. Future? I asked quietly. She tilted her head, voice dripping with condescension. We all know change is coming. You can either cooperate and step aside gracefully, or... She let the sentence hang, her eyes gleaming. Watch as those who still care about you begin to see the truth, that you're not fit to handle things anymore. A threat hidden inside a smile. She wanted to make me small, invisible, the outsider in a family I had built with my own 2 hands. My fingers brushed the recorder in my pocket. Cool metal against my skin. I didn't show it, but knowing it was there gave me strength. I straightened, letting my voice cut through the air. Enough. I know exactly what the 2 of you are doing. The dinners, the rumors, the documents you tried to slip past me. It ends here. Marla's smirk faltered, just for a second. Darian's brow furrowed. You've twisted family into a weapon, I continued, keeping my tone even, deliberate. And you think I don't have proof? You think I'm too old to see through it? Marla's mask cracked. Her voice rose, sharp and venomous. You're clinging to things that aren't yours anymore. You'll only make this worse for yourself. Darian tried to intervene, his words stumbling, but I could see the sweat prickling at his temple. I reached into my pocket, drew out the recorder, and pressed play. Her voice filled the air, Marla's voice, calm and cold, captured in the cafe. Step aside, or you'll end up alone. Darian and I will handle everything once you're gone. The sound seemed to freeze them both. Darian's eyes widened, shame flickering across his face. Marla's mouth tightened, but her mask slipped back into place faster than I thought possible. For a moment, I saw the boy I had raised, hesitant, uncertain, standing inside the man before me. But Marla leaned close to him, whispering words I couldn't catch. Whatever she said turned his hesitation into a glare sharp enough to cut stone. I looked at him, my son, and wondered if the boy I once knew still lived somewhere inside, or if he was gone for good. The morning sun filtered weakly through the blinds, yet the house felt darker than ever. Silence pressed against the walls, heavy and merciless, reminding me of what had unfolded the night before. Darian's face haunted me, that flicker of hesitation in his eyes, as though he wasn't entirely sure of the role he'd been forced into. That expression lingered, a sliver of humanity buried beneath Marla's venom, but hope was a dangerous thing. I had learned that too many times. The phone rang, shattering the stillness. I picked it up with a shaky hand. On the other end was my cousin Elaine, her voice clipped and uncertain. Lemuel, I don't know what's going on, but people are saying things about your health, about your mind slipping. Marla said you've been confused lately, paranoid. Is it true? I pressed the receiver close, willing my voice steady. Elaine, you've known me your whole life. Do I sound confused now? A pause, then a non-committal sigh. I don't know, Lemuel. I just don't want trouble for the family. When the line went dead, I sat frozen, humiliated by how quickly rumors could rewrite decades of trust. The calls came one after another, some voices sharp with accusation, others tentative, laced with pity that burned even deeper. Marla's narrative had spread overnight, painting me as a man too fragile to manage his own life. Each word twisted the knife further, not because of strangers' judgment, but because the betrayal came from within the bloodline I had nurtured. Later that afternoon, Wendell knocked at my door. He looked uneasy, shifting from one foot to the other. "Lemuel," he muttered, "I hate to be the bearer of this, but your family's been talking in public. I heard mention of guardianship. They're saying maybe it's time someone else took charge of your affairs." The word cut through me like glass. Guardianship, stripping me of autonomy, my dignity signed away under the guise of care. I clenched my fists to steady the tremor in my hands. "Did you hear who pushed that talk?" "Marla," Wendell answered softly. But others nodded along, even your sister-in-law. The betrayal was suffocating. That evening I phoned her myself. "Tell me it isn't true," I demanded. Her voice came cold, dismissive. "Lemuel, maybe it's for the best. You've always been stubborn. Marla only wants what's right. Perhaps you should accept help instead of fighting everyone." A silence fell so thick it swallowed my words. The woman who once shared Sunday dinners with me now sided with the one trying to erase me. That night, as despair weighed me down, a knock came again. When I opened the door, Darian stood there. His eyes darted away from mine, his shoulders slouched as if burdened by invisible chains. "Dad," he said quietly, "we need to talk." We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. He spoke slowly, his voice lacking its usual conviction. "Marla, she just thinks things would be simpler if you let her handle the paperwork. But I need to know. Do you still keep old records? Bank accounts? Things Mom handled?" It wasn't just what he asked, it was how he asked it. His tone wavered, unsure, betraying cracks in his loyalty. For the first time, I saw not just my son under Marla's influence, but a man caught between duty and manipulation. He didn't defend her as fiercely as before. That hesitation, however faint, was a lifeline. He left soon after, promising nothing, his figure fading into the night. The following day, Wendell returned, bearing news from a dinner at Darian's house. "They had a gathering last night," he explained. "Marla led the talk, telling everyone you're a danger to yourself, painting pictures of you losing touch with reality, but not everyone bought it. Harlan Creed, he spoke up, said he'd known you for years, that you're sharp as ever." It got tense. Marla wasn't pleased. Harlan, an old friend, not seen in years, yet still defending me when I wasn't there to defend myself. That sliver of loyalty shone like a lantern in the fog of betrayal. But Wendell's voice dropped, grave. "Marla isn't done. She's pushing something bigger. Legal action, maybe. She wants to strip you of control completely." That night I sat in my living room, staring at the faded photograph of my late wife. Her gentle eyes looked back, reminding me of the years we had built this family from nothing but sacrifice and faith. I whispered to her, "They want to erase me, but I'm not finished, not yet." Resolve replaced sorrow. Tomorrow, I would take the first step toward fighting back. The morning light filtered through the blinds, painting soft stripes across the kitchen table. Beside the old coffee cup sat a photograph of my late wife, her smile frozen in a moment when life still felt whole. My hand lingered on the frame as if I could draw strength from it. Then, with a deep breath, I dialed Talia Kern's number. Her voice on the other end was alert, steady, and younger than my own wearied tone. She promised to meet me without hesitation. When I hung up, the silence of the house no longer felt like defeat. For the first time in weeks, I had the faintest sense that control could return. Talia arrived not long after, brisk and professional. She took a seat across from me, spreading her files with the kind of precision that reassured me she was built for battles like this. I told her everything: Darian's accidental message, Marla's cold maneuvering, the folder I glimpsed, Wendell's warnings. She listened without interruption, pen moving quickly across her pad. When I finished, she leaned forward. "You're not powerless, Mr. Garrison. There are steps we can take. First, a defense against any guardianship filings. Second, we secure your estate so nothing can be transferred without your consent. And third," she tapped the table, her eyes sharp, "we investigate. If they've already filed anything, we'll know." Hearing her lay out a plan was like breathing after being held underwater. She slid papers toward me, forms to authorize her representation, petitions to protect what I still had. My hand shook as I signed, not from fear this time, but from resolve. Later that day, she returned from the courthouse with a thin folder. She opened it carefully, revealing photocopies of financial documents. At the bottom of each was my name and a signature I barely recognized. "This," she said, "is forgery. Someone filed these weeks ago." The sight burned me more than fire could. I remembered Marla insisting I sign routine documents at the dinner table, sliding them between plates as if they were harmless. I remembered Darian avoiding my eyes. Rage and clarity hit together. They had planned this long before that voice message slipped. Talia's instructions were precise. Remain calm, never lose composure, and trust the process. "They'll try to paint you as unstable," she warned. "Our job is to show you are the opposite, lucid, deliberate, prepared." That evening I sat at my desk, her advice ringing in my ears. The journal I'd begun weeks ago now had new purpose. Every word, every date, every whisper became evidence. No longer just the thoughts of a wounded father, but the record of a man ready to defend his legacy. Before the night ended, I called Darian. My voice was measured, but every syllable carried weight. "Your lawyer will tell you soon enough. Papers have been filed to protect me in this house. If you follow Marla into this, you'll find yourself standing across from me in court." There was silence on the line. I imagined his face, caught between anger and shame, though I couldn't see it. Finally, he muttered something vague about needing to think and hung up. When the call ended, the house was quiet again. But it was no longer the silence of defeat. It was the silence before battle. The courthouse loomed before me that morning, a place I had passed countless times in Asheville but never expected to enter as a defendant in my own family's drama. Talia Kern walked beside me, her presence steady, her voice low and reassuring. The winter air stung my face as we climbed the stone steps, each one echoing the weight of betrayal that had brought me here. Inside, the murmur of voices quieted as people turned their heads. Relatives who once shared Sunday dinners now sat on opposite benches, whispering about me as though I were already gone. Darian avoided my eyes, keeping close to Marla. She stood straight, polished, radiating the confidence of someone who thought victory was already hers. I forced my chest to steady, breathing slow. Fear hovered in the room like a fog, but beneath it a quiet resolve anchored me. I would not let them erase me without a fight. When the judge entered, silence fell, papers shuffled, voices lowered, and suddenly my life, the house I built, the savings I guarded, the dignity I fought to keep, was on trial. The first to speak were relatives I hadn't seen in months. My sister-in-law, eyes narrowed, repeated Marla's words. "He's slipping. He forgets things. He can't manage on his own." Others nodded, some hesitant, others eager, as though aligning with Marla might win them favor. Each sentence landed like a stone against my chest, but I remembered Talia's advice. "Don't let them bait you. Stay calm." I gripped the arm of my chair, nails pressing into wood, but stayed still. Their voices blurred together, unstable, forgetful, a danger to himself, lies dressed as concern. My name, spoken in tones of pity, rang through the chamber like a slow unraveling of my years of sacrifice. Finally, it was my turn. Talia's hand brushed my shoulder as I rose, her nod steadying me. My voice came firm, though my throat tightened with each word. I spoke of raising Darian after his mother's passing, of the nights I worked overtime so he could finish school, of the debts I paid when their marriage nearly collapsed. I reminded them that I had never asked for recognition, only honesty. If you doubt me, I said, then let truth, not rumor, be the measure. The courtroom grew quiet. Some relatives shifted in their seats, eyes lowering to the floor. For a moment, I felt their judgment falter. Then the unexpected happened. The door opened, and Harlan Creed, an old friend, thought long gone from this story, stepped forward. He was sworn in, his voice clear, his presence commanding. He told of years he had watched me sacrifice for family, and of whispers he'd heard from Marla about rearranging finances for her benefit. He recalled seeing documents in her hand that bore a signature he doubted was mine. Gasps rippled through the room. Marla's expression cracked, if only for a moment, before she forced a smile again. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing, and ordered a deeper review of the financial filings. The hearing would not end today. We left the courtroom divided. Family split down invisible lines. Some clung to Marla's version, unwilling to question her. Others lingered, uncertain, their doubt visible in their silence. Darian walked near me but kept his distance, his face troubled, torn between loyalty and blood. As we passed through the heavy doors, Marla leaned close enough for only me to hear. Her whisper was sharp as a knife. "This isn't over. You'll regret ever fighting me." I kept my gaze ahead, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a reply. The war was far from done, but for the first time, I sensed the tide shifting. The dawn came pale and quiet, as if the world itself were holding its breath. I rose before the alarm clock rang, long before the town stirred awake. The stillness of the house pressed in, but it didn't crush me this time. My wife's photograph sat on the dresser, her smile frozen in that long-ago summer light. I paused, letting my fingers trace the frame. "Stay with me today," I whispered, my voice steady, not pleading. This morning wasn't about fear anymore. It was about standing tall for everything I had built, and everything they wanted to take away. The breakfast was simple. Toast and coffee I barely touched, but it anchored me, a ritual I had repeated through decades of storms. Images of Darian as a boy flashed unbidden, running across the yard barefoot, calling out for me to push him higher on the swing. That boy felt a lifetime away, replaced by the man who now sought to erase me. By the time I reached the courthouse, the cold air braced me like an old friend. I walked inside not as a victim, but as a man resolved. The courtroom filled with tension sharp enough to cut. Talia Kern rose first, calm as ever, her voice slicing through the hush. She laid out every piece with clarity, the voice message dripping with contempt, the forged documents Marla had pushed under my nose, the testimony of neighbors and friends who knew me as steady, not unstable. "Mr. Garrison," she said to the judge, "has lived with dignity all his life. What you've heard is not a man unraveling, it's a man resisting manipulation." Marla rose after, her composure slipping. She spoke with venom, eyes darting, painting me as paranoid and unfit. "He's confused, Your Honor. He clings to old grievances. He doesn't know what's best for himself anymore." Her voice cracked at the edges, and for the first time, she looked less like a poised wife and more like someone cornered. Darian sat beside her, silent, his hands folded too tightly. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. The judge leaned forward, silence stretching until it felt like the whole world had narrowed to this single room. "The court finds," the judge began, "that Mr. Lemuel Garrison remains fully competent to manage his affairs." A gasp rippled across the benches. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with release. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "evidence of financial irregularities connected to Mrs. Marla Voss will be referred for investigation." The room erupted, half in whispers, half in shock. Marla's face twisted with fury, words spilling out that no one took seriously anymore. Darian tugged at her sleeve, trying to quiet her, but he couldn't even meet my eyes. For the first time in months, I felt the weight lift. I closed my eyes and murmured softly, "Thank you," as though my wife stood right there, her hand resting over mine. Outside, the family split like shattered glass. Some avoided me, shame flickering across their faces. Others glared, unwilling to let go of Marla's lies. Darian stepped close for a moment, his lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. He turned away, guiding Marla down the steps. She spat one last whisper as she passed me. "This isn't over." I let it wash over me. I had faced storms greater than her words. Harlan Creed appeared at my side, steady as always. He put a hand on my shoulder and said quietly, "Truth has a way of standing taller than lies." His words lingered as I walked back to the car, the courthouse shrinking in the rearview mirror, my heart both heavy and light. That evening, back in the stillness of my home, I sat beside old photographs spread across the table, my wife's smile, Darian as a boy, Christmas mornings, Sunday dinners, all the fragments of a life built with love and sacrifice. I spoke into the silence, as if the walls themselves could hold my words. Wealth can divide, but dignity, that's mine to keep. Betrayal cuts deep, but truth has its own way of healing. My message, if anyone should ever hear it, never yield your worth, no matter how sharp the betrayal. The real inheritance we leave behind isn't money or houses, it's the strength of our character, the proof that we lived with honor even when love was broken. Family may betray, lies may spread, but legacy, it belongs to the truth, and mine will endure.